Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What's the most outrageous reason someone filed for divorce? Taught the parakeet certain cuss words for his wife. Hahaha. The parrot lives with the man now. I worked for a law office where the owner would talk about the man who sued for divorce because his wife would no longer allow him to use a loaded gun as a marital aid. She had apparently agreed to it at some point and was fine with the gum as long as it was empty. But that just wasn't good enough for him. Eater, since some folks need it spelled out. By marital aid, I mean a dildo. He wanted to stick a loaded gum in her vag as part of their sex routine. She was down for it as long as the gum was empty. But that wasn't good enough. And he thought this was reasonable grounds for divorce. Also, I wasn't trying to be pretentious by saying marital aid. I just really didn't want to have to type out that he wanted to use a loaded gum as a dildo. But I guess nobody's leaving this thread happy today. My dad was a divorce lawyer. He had a client who wanted to divorce her husband for 2 reasons. 1. He did not have enough hair on his chest. 2. He did not drive fast enough. Keep in mind this was in the 70s when chest hair was a bit more important. Wasn't the reason, but did happen during the course of the divorce. Neither side would follow the court orders. When they had to go back to court, they were fighting over a pistol and the man's grandmother's bowls. I assumed for weeks that these bowls were some sort of heirloom or expensive china. When they finally brought the bowls in to swap, they were ducking Tupperware. Colleague handled a case where money was not an issue but the kids were. Neither parent wanted them. I had some friends get divorced because she legit hated Dale Earnhardt and he legit hated Jeff Gordon. Paralegal here. Still remember an early case I worked on. Man divorced his wife for her bingo addiction. 10 to 12 times per week she went to bingo. She was 82, he was 86. But the all-time greatest. To 20 somethings. They were irreconcilable because he kept smoking her weed mustache when she wasn't home. I was a legal assistant when this case came in. But this lady divorced her husband of 2 months because he got her an iPad case for her birthday instead of the expensive jewelry she wanted. He had an argument with the new in-laws during the wedding and moved out at around 5 AM during the first night. Not a divorce lawyer but used to practice criminal defense work. Once had a heavily pregnant client that attacked her husband, of less than a year, with an iron. Said client was now sitting in a police cell, sobbing and insisting that her husband deserved it and she wanted a divorce. I asked what he had supposedly done, assuming he'd cheated or something similar. Turns out she'd checked his phone and found a single porn site in his browsing history, from over 2 years beforehand. Not the most pleasant thing to discover, but hardly worth battering him half to death and demanding a divorce. He got drunk at the wedding. She did not like it and decided to divorce him right after the honeymoon, which she went to without him. Moreover, this was all an elaborate scheme of divorce robbery, because the guy was loaded, and so was his entire family. They were loaded because they were a family of excellent lawyers, and he was a 3rd-generation lawyer, with all the smarts and experience of his predecessors combined. Let's just say it did not go well for her. My client put his wife in an assisted living facility based on a misdiagnosis, the medication of which caused the wife to be unable to care for herself. While in the facility, my client shocker started dating another woman and methinks began using hard drugs. He used a loot of money on both of these things. She eventually got off the medication and got better. Suffice to say, she was not happy about what had transpired. I didn't like her anymore, 2 days after being married. I used to work in a general practice firm and the guy that worked across the hallway from me was a family law attorney. He was a good attorney but every day I would hear him yelling on the phone at his clients. One day I asked him why he did when it was obviously stressful in a non-legal work type of way. He pointed out that there's one chapter of statutes dedicated to it. And you need to know a little civil procedure and that's about it. It's an amazing segment of business. Not only is not that difficult from an intellectual rigor perspective, but holy shit, Those family law attorneys make serious bank for willing to put up with the headaches. I would routinely hear him yelling at clients like, "Don't go over there. I'm instructing you to not go there. If you go there, I will fire you as a client, and when you go to jail I won't take your call." For the record, this was in a fairly affluent suburb. Most of the disputes that would drive him into my office for a break would revolve around parents wanting to know their course for ex-hubby dropping the kids off 4 minutes later than agreed and how the client planned to get even. I also recall one time a client had gotten his cell phone number and called him on a Saturday evening with some emergency. Spoiler. His ex had done something egregious like took the kids to the pool without his consent. So, on Monday morning the attorney sent the client an invoice for $500 for a Saturday phone call, which probably lasted like 5 minutes. He did it so the guy would call him and say, "What's this?" And then the attorney could explain to him that is what he charges for non-emergency weekend calls. This time he'd waive it, but if he ever did it again he could be sure to get a bill that he'd end up paying. Staff attorney for a judge. Not a divorce but a custody modification hearing. Ex-wife wanted sole land custody of the kids because the ex-husband was spending all his money on a palm reader psychic and refused to pay child support. On cross, ex-wife's attorney got him to admit that he was spending all his discretionary income on this psychic. He said he had spent over $5,000 on readings and other services there. Judges frequently chime in with questions in domestic matters. So my judge asked why he was not paying support as his divorce decree required. His explanation was the psychic could read that his children were provided for without his money and he would be able to repay the ex when he takes the children to Mexico permanently to seek great riches there. Which my judge read as my psychic told me to kidnap my kids. TLDR. Deadbeat ex-husband spent all his money on a psychic rather than child support. Told the judge he intended to kidnap his children. Edit. Words. My grandfather's brother was a judge who presided over state issue marriages from time to time. One couple he married returned 6 months later to confirm the wedding and end their trial marriage. When he thusly informed them that there was no such thing and that they had been married for 6 months, they subsequently broke up. I knew a guy from a high school job who divorced his wife of 2 months because she would sleep with a nightlight but he could only sleep in total darkness. As they apparently never lived together until after getting married. He hated her nightlight so much that he would often sleep on the couch instead. But sometimes he would claim the bed for himself and lock her out of the bedroom for the night. This was an eccentric late 40s man working at a Burger King who acted like all the other high school co-workers were his best chums. And often told us these weird stories. I'm glad I don't work with him anymore. Friend of mine divorced his then wife because she would only speak French when her family would come over. She was Spanish, as was her family. To add, her family spoke English, French and Spanish. He could only speak Spanish and English. She got bored of being married to him. Her family basically talked shit about him whilst he was there. Was only when he recorded a conversation whilst they were there and got it translated he found out what was going on. Edit. Whoopsie. I am a lawyer that handles quite a few divorces, among other things. And I've seen all sorts of reasons for marriages ending. The only thing that is consistently true, and relevant to this question, is that it is never for just one reason. And it is never one-sided. In fact, I've started telling potential clients in our initial interview that I am well aware that I am going to uncover some dirt on my client in the process, not to scare them, but to put their mind to ease that I've seen worse. The fact that you haven't been 100% an angel up to this point doesn't scare me. And I'd rather find out about it from my client beforehand than later on from their spouse at the worst possible moment. All this is just to say that when you hear about people divorcing over one stupid argument or mistake, usually that's just the straw that broke the camel's back. That said, some of the lighter straws I've seen include a guy who is 100% convinced that his wife, our client, is actually in love with his sister and just using him as a cover, but he also claims she is having sex with me to pay for her legal fees. And with every male whose phone number is in her call history. A woman who is divorcing my client because he was too sad after his father died last year. My client had to break down her door to get his father's ashes a few weeks after he left the house, and she refused to let him back in or give them to him. And a woman who claims my client was emotionally abusive towards her because he refused to yell at her and sat in silence ignoring her when she screamed at him. He has this recorded, time-stamped for the dates and time she insists the incidents occurred. And she's listened to them and his complete silence as she goes on tirades and insists this proves her point that he was emotionally distant and abusive. I worked as a paralegal for a divorce lawyer. Case analysis was one of my main responsibilities. I shit you not. A recently married couple of 2 years broke it off because the husband would not stop feeding the dog. The dog got outrageously fat. Apparently she saw connection between the dog and future children. I got into scams because of a lawyer in my old office represented a woman whose husband left her because she got involved in a romance scam that started as a pen pal. It was a weird marriage. He was clearly a closet gay who married her for her money because she was ugly as all hell. They kept separate lives for 30 years. She began corresponding with someone she believed was a 3-star general serving in Afghanistan. It went the typical way scams like this do. She fell in love and he needed $$ to move from Afghanistan back to the United States. She eventually would transfer him about $70,000 over the course of 8 months. Even when my friend brought me into the conference room to lay out the case as being a scam, for which I had piles of proof for, she continued to transfer money, including a $8,000 transfer the day after. The judge ruled she owed her husband $4 what she gave the scammer. So $70,000 plus he issued a temporary restraining order barring her from transferring marital assets. My friend dumped her as a client when she showed interest in appealing the TRO and trying to expedite her divorce so she could marry the scammer. This is more sad than outrageous. But some of my colleagues specialize in elder law and more people than you'd think get divorced on paper in the US in order to receive Medicare benefits without having to lose their home. See for example this article. Edit, Medicare Medicaid. Now. But the story of the couple in Algeria always gets me. Groom sees his new wife the morning after the wedding without makeup, takes her for an intruder, and proceeds to sue for over $10,000 for psychological trauma. Not a divorce lawyer, but I had a friend whose parents divorced for irreconcilable differences over time spent playing EverQuest. Now. But my old neighbor divorced his wife because she no longer wanted to dye her hair blonde. Probs more reasons. But that was his final straw. Most people are interpreting outrageous as an overblown minor annoyance. But I'll put one out there on the other end. When I was working at the DA's office, there was a woman who had sex with her son's 15-year-old friend. The awkward part was that the husband was the high school baseball coach for both of the boys. My job at the time involved going through the evidence, including all of the text messages, where they eventually decided upon divorce. The only thing I really recall is that the man interrupted the text conversation about the affair to say BRB. I'm going to get a McRib. The texting resumed about 40 minutes later. Needless to say, criminal law is weird and I decided to pursue another specialty. Knew a couple a little over a decade ago who I was close friends with. The wife wanted children and after several months of trying plus a doctor visit later he was found to be infertile, unable to have children due to his sperm. She filed for divorce several weeks later. Then one random hookup later she got pregnant from a one-night stand while the proceedings were still going. He used that in the court battle, which assisted with him taking the majority of their possessions post-split due to her actions. Paralegal. A couple got divorced over a cat. Wife called cat Snowball because of white fur and only wanted the cat to eat wet food or chicken breast. Husband called cat Lily again because of white fur and believed it should only eat dry food. These two argued for a year over custody of the cat but did not give a shit about their human kids aged 15 months, 4 years, and 6 years old. Kind of in the same category, I've had a lot of younger male potential clients come in for divorce consults with their mother. Then, during the consult, the mother does 98% of the talking. And it's clear who actually wants the divorce. I'll usually escort mom to wait in the lobby while I talk to the son directly. And most of the time he's just there to appease his mother. On a related note, I once had just the mother call for a consult because she said explicitly she wanted her son to get a divorce. I politely informed her that's not how divorces worked. Edit, because I apparently don't know how to italicize things on Reddit anymore. I do my student practice at my family's law firm. Young woman filed for a divorce because her husband drank one beer during weekdays after a day of work. The guy wasn't violent, doing drugs, or anything like that. He was just a normal, polite guy who liked to have a cold one after 10-hour shift. They are a very good couple and argue so rarely that this woman's friends told her to write down everything he did to upset her and reread it every day. So she had reasons to be angry about. My mom, lawyer, set the woman straight. Told her he just doing what all guys do and to find herself new friends instead of ones ready to sabotage their marriage. Worked in matrimonial law for a year and a half before I had to leave BC. It just overwhelmed me with how awful humanity is. I'll never forget filing papers that described her soon-to-be ex-husband's behavior, including masturbates on the living room couch without closing the door and leaves sticky tissues everywhere, with further description of their 3 young children potentially walking in on him. Not a divorce lawyer, but got out of my first marriage because shortly after we got married he decided he didn't like the way I talked and asked me not to talk when we were out in company unless I could talk straight. I know a couple, both lawyers, got separated because the husband can't stand the wife's loud and energetic personality. My aunt had a case where the wife had glued all of the outdoor hoses together so he wouldn't spend more time washing his vehicle anymore. When the glue didn't work she just cut them all up. When he bought new ones they filed for divorce. Not the most outrageous, but I had a client incur about 20 additional hours of billable hours because he and his ex-wife were battling and went to trial over their Star Wars collection. This was the only issue at trial. They were able to work out custody, child support, the house, but the Star Wars collection went to trial. The judge ended up splitting it in the most ashlish way possible, basically giving each side half of what they wanted and then mixing and matching everything else and breaking up collections. When speaking about it at a conference, the judge admitted she did it because if they were going to act like children, she would treat them like children. The thing is, the value of this collection was over $100,000. So hardly kids stuff. Neither side had it in them to appeal, nor was the case law on either side given judicial discretion in property distribution. Not necessarily the most outrageous reason, but definitely some outrageous conduct. The saddest divorce we were hired to do, but ended up not doing for reasons that'll become apparent, was a woman in her 50s whose husband had really just let himself go. He was over 400 pounds. Just did his 3rd triple bypass. Refused to do anything different. Just smoked and drank all day long while watching TV. His doctors told him he was going to die in 6 months if he didn't change his behavior. He told them they were all morons and could go to hell. Meanwhile, his wife is this successful woman who makes over $10,000 a month on her hobby, while making 6 figures in her normal work. She lost all respect for him, all desire, and all love for him by watching his decline. For the past few years, she can barely stand him. It also sounded like there was some verbal abuse going on where he constantly accused her of cheating and gaslighting her while cheating himself throughout their marriage, and spending all his money on coke. The usual. His accusations ramped up considerably once she lost about 200 pounds the good old-fashioned way. We were working on her divorce and one of her provisions was that he keep her as the beneficiary on his life insurance, for obvious reasons. She assured us he would agree to everything she suggested in the paperwork if she talked him through it. One day, we get an email from her saying to hold the divorce. Not because they were reconciling, but because he refused to keep her as the beneficiary on his life insurance if they divorced. So, she stopped the divorce. so that she could get the benefits when he inevitably dies in a few months. We've had one where the opposing party, husband, found out his old wife, late 70s, was terminally ill. He started using every tactic in the book to delay the final hearing so that she would die before their divorce was finalized and he wouldn't have to lose anything. We just got another where the couple agreed to everything beforehand. Signed documents. Agreed to a dissolution and how to share custody. Now husband has a vengeance boner and wants to trash the dissolution. Take everything from her. And take away their kid from her. Why? Because she told him no when he asked for their kid a full day and night ahead of schedule when she had already made plans with the kid. I represented a porn actress webcam model who filed for divorce from her husband who also did the porn webcam model business. He would do gay porn on the side because the pay was better. She was hesitant about it, but dealt with it because the pay was decent. Both sides had an agreement that it wasn't cheating as long as it was for work. One day she came home early and found her husband in bed with 2 men. They were not filming. That was too much for her. Needless to say, the old conservative judge couldn't wrap his head around this one.